So here we are looking at our 1954 F100. We got the stock 223. And we got the 6-volt positive ground system still running in this truck. A lot of guys are quick to go to 12 volt when they're doing their restorations or trying to get their cars back on the road. It's a good thing, it's not bad, but for me, I like keeping the 6 volt. Just adds to the nostalgia, adds to the adventure, you know, and also it's an opportunity to learn about some of the older ways of doing things in the older system. You know, for many years they ran this, you know, up until the mid-50s. I believe this truck, this year, 54, is the last year that Ford ran 6 volt in their vehicles. So 6 volt positive ground is meaning that the positive cable goes to your chassis ground. So this cable goes from the positive terminal of the battery down to the block, and then the block is grounded through a cable at the starter to the frame, and then your negative cable, instead of running to the chassis like on a 12 volt system, it's running up to the starter solenoid, and that powers your ignition circuit and your accessory circuit. So this harness goes back to the ignition switch. So on a 6 volt system, it requires twice as much amps as a 12 volt. So you need twice as much power passing through your wires to operate your lights, your starter, your ignition, your radio, whatever you have, you need twice as much amps to power it. So when you have a slow start issue or a hard start, you know, where you're like, man, I just put a new battery, I put new cables, and my engine just does not want to crank over. What it is, it's your cables. When I first got this truck, you know, back here at the house and started working on it, I put a brand new battery. I went and bought brand new cables from the auto parts store, not knowing 12 volt and 6 volt were different. I figured, hey, new cables, it should work. But then when I went to crank it, the thing would barely turn over. I might get 1 or 2 revolutions and then the thing would just not turn over anymore. And then I noticed that the battery cables were like burning hot. So they're burning hot because you're trying to force all that power through a skinny little wire. You know, I live right here next to the freeway, and conveniently there's a bottleneck right here. So the freeway goes from like 5 lanes and it condenses down to 3, and then they also added the fast track, so that makes it even less. So there's always accidents right here, there's always pileups, there's always backups, and that's because of a bottleneck. And what happens with your 6 volt systems is you have all this power trying to get to the starter, but your cable is the bottleneck. So it's almost like having a 5-lane highway going down to 3 lanes. Everything is going to get backed up, get hot, and it's not going to be able to get the power to the starter that you need to turn over the motor. These motors are not very high compression. They don't need a lot, but they do need enough power to turn them over. The parts are heavy, you know, the engine oil's thick, so you need that amperage. So once again, 6 volt systems need twice as large cables to get that power flowing, and that's just not for the starter, that's also for your lights. You know, right now I temporarily have this running to my brake switch, but on a 6 volt system you want to have 14 or 12 gauge wires, whereas in a 12 volt system you could get away with 16, 18, even like, you know, 20, 22 gauge wires, thinner wires. So real quick, let's look over here. Here's the difference. This is a 12 volt battery cable. It's pretty thin. And what we're running here is this double aught cable. It's pretty thick in comparison. So when I put this cable on, the truck would not turn over and this cable would get extremely hot. What I did is I went to a local heavy equipment rental place, and I was able to buy some used cable that they had. You know, the bunch that I have had like a big cut in it, so I was able to buy like 50 feet of it from them for, you know, pennies on the dollar, which was good. And I was able to make all these cables for the truck. What I did is I got the cable, cut it to length, got a piece of copper pipe from Home Depot, smashed it, drilled a hole, slid it on here, and then we soldered it and then put some shrink tubing, and these cables have been working awesome. The truck turns over pretty quick, almost might turn over a little quick, where, you know, has a little issue flooding sometimes, but let's see how she fires up. So it turns over pretty quick. We're charging here at 7.9 volts. That's another thing too, is getting your voltage regulator dialed in. There's some adjustments on your voltage regulator. So you can see at idle, it's charging at about 6.6, 6.4, right? It's kind of low, the engine's idling a little low right now, but once you give it the RPMs, it goes up. You know, it's about a 2 volt increase, which if you had a 12 volt system, it would go up to about 14.2 volts. So you got about 2 volt increase. So here, I believe we're about pretty good. But since I did that and adjusted the voltage regulator, I haven't had any issues. So once again, this is Matt with Side Yard Mechanic. Thanks for checking out this video. Hope it helped you. Have a good one.